I am back in my Xelevations and X section drawing. I've updated the plan, and you can see in the bottom corner, it tells me that an Xref was modified. And if I wanted to, I could compare it, but at this point, it's not necessary because I am familiar with the changes that I've made. I'll go ahead and just close that bubble, and I'll continue to draw. Over on the far left, this is my section. In the middle here is my front elevation, and then the one next to it, side elevation. A couple of things that I like to do is I come in here and I look at my external references and I ask myself, what information do I not need to see? And in this case, it's the hatching. I'm going to go to my Home tab, Layers panel, and then click on this icon here where it says Freeze. When I click on that, I go over to my external reference and I'm going to freeze this layer. And that's the hatch layer. And then I will go ahead and enter, and it takes that information away. Something that I've done to my AutoCAD user interface here is that I've made changes to the way the Xref appears on screen. If I go over to my application button and I come over here to the options and I look at my display tab, right here it says fade control, Xref display. And if I just hover over this for a second, it tells me that it's going to control the dimming for all of the drawing Xref objects. And right now I have that dimming set to 0. Let's try more of this. Let me just go ahead and click OK. So I really extended that. And the fading now is at 77. And you can see how it fades out. And this is a nice feature because it allows me to focus on what I actually am drawing in this file and what's coming in as an image, as an Xref. But that's a little too much for me. I've always made changes to the interface, and I like to see my external reference. So I leave this at 0, I apply that, and then click OK. Because I know what has been brought in as an external reference, but just so you have that control, you can make those changes. I'm looking at my plan, and I did drop in one window here, and I probably would like to put another window as well. So before I continue, I will go back to my floor plan, and I'm going to drop in the windows that are missing. I'm going to click on the Xref, and then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select Open Xref. And here's my drawing file. Now, what I'm going to do is edit this drawing file and really finish some things off. For me, I don't need to see the furniture, so I'm going to turn off the furniture like this. And then I'll enter. And then the hatch pattern also, I can turn off for now. And I know also that I'll probably need to edit the hatch pattern once I'm done putting in my windows. So let me turn that off as well. It tells me it's the current layer. Do I want to turn it off? My response is yes. And then I make sure, first of all, I'll enter, and then I'll make sure that I have another layer as my current layer. And I'll just pick layer 0 for now. So I want to place a window here, and I want to show it as simple as possible. And to do that, if I just come over here to look at this window, I'm basically showing the opening itself. And then I'm showing the 2-inch frame that goes around my window. And then I'm simply drawing a line that represents the glass. That's as simple as I can keep it to represent a window opening. So I'll do the same thing over here. And I decided that this window was going to be a rather wide window. And I can't remember the measurements, so I'll come over here, do a quick measure. And that is a 6-foot wide window. Tap the escape key. First thing I'm going to do is trim that opening. So I'll type TR, enter. I'll pick the 2 lines, enter. And I'll begin to draw my window. So now I will change the layer to the A-plan layer. And I'll draw a line from here to there, enter, using my spacebar, and then tap the spacebar again to repeat the line command. And then tap spacebar to terminate. What I need to do now is drop in the window frame. And when I say drop in, I basically mean just take this line and offset it 2 inches in, and then do the same thing on the other side. Let me show you how I can use this offset. If I type O, enter, and then I type 2, enter, that's my offset distance. In my command line, it does give me some options about taking the objects and what layers to place them on. So let me back up here for a second, hit the escape key, and then type O and enter. And look at the options. Before I type in that distance, it says through, erase, layer. I'm not going to touch any of that yet. I just want you to see those options. And I'm going to proceed now. I'll enter. I'll take this line, offset it, and then enter. And now I have to take this line and make sure that it's on the proper layer. I can select it, come over here, place it on the right layer, tap the escape key, all done. Or I could have used match properties. And let me show you how I would have done that. I click on match properties, select this line as my source, select this one as my destination, and enter. So that's using the offset command just as is. But I take this line and delete it. Let me use the offset command again. This time I type O and enter, and I'm going to use the layer option. So I'll type L and enter, and look at the options that I have. Do I want to offset and keep it on the source layer, or do I want to offset and have it go to the current layer? And if I pick current, and now I still have my 2-inch distance, so I'll just enter here. Now when I select that line and I offset it, notice how it's going to the current layer, which happens to be my A-plan layer. And that's exactly where I want it. So I go ahead and click, and then I come over here. I take this line and I offset it 2 inches that way, and then enter. That's a time saver. I'm trying to be as effective and as efficient as I can be. So I took advantage of some of the offset options to accomplish this. And I know it took me a while to explain, but that's because I was being very deliberate in my actions. But in the future, it goes much quicker. So now I'm going to draw a line here down the middle from midpoint to midpoint, and I have my window. And the next thing I'd like to do is drop in a window over here. But I want this window to be centered, not on the wall, more or less centered on the stairs coming up. Let me do a distance check, and I'm going to type DI enter from this endpoint to that endpoint. That's a 6 foot wide distance, but I don't want the window to be exactly 6 feet. I want the window to be slightly smaller. And let's say 4 feet for now. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a line from the midpoint here all the way across using my O track. I don't want it to go past that endpoint. So find the intersection and click, and then enter to terminate the command. I want it to be 4 feet wide, so I'm going to offset a distance of 2 feet in both directions. So 2 feet that way, 2 feet down, and enter. And then I do not need this line anymore, so I select it and I delete. And now I'm going to trim. So I type TR, enter, and then I'm simply going to click and drag like this so that I can delete all 4 of those segments. And now I enter. And then this is the opening, so I'm going to match properties. So I'll type MA, enter. And I'd like to match this source and this destination. Objects, enter, and I have my 4 foot opening. Now, I could easily draw everything in here from scratch, but I have a window here. And I think what I'd like to do is make a copy of this window and edit so that I can put it in place. But I want to be careful that I don't pick any additional lines. I'm going to lock a layer. So Home tab, Layers, Panel, Lock. So I click on Lock and I lock my wall layer. If I hover over one of the lines like this, it shows that lock symbol. And I can also see that it has been grayed out a little bit. That's going to protect me from making any changes to the walls. So now I'm going to make a copy. So CP or CO is the keyboard shortcut. I enter, selecting my objects. And now, even if I go with an implied crossing window like this, notice how it tells me in the command line, 11 were found, 6 of them were on a locked layer, meaning I cannot pick them. And that's a good thing. So now I'm going to enter, and I'll simply pick from this midpoint and bring it up to about right there. And then tap the escape key. Then my next step is to rotate this window. So I type RO, enter, select my objects, enter, and I'll take it from the midpoint here since nothing is in the way, and then rotate this way. Now I know that I need to make this smaller by 2 feet. So I'm going to use the stretch command. Let me just come over here and click stretch. To select the objects, it tells me to select a crossing window or crossing polygon. I used to accidentally pick and go in the wrong direction. And when I did that, it just wasn't working out for me. And then I would come back and have to pick them again and then try to stretch, and it would work. Here's a little tip. When I go to stretch, when I go to select objects, I type C and enter. That will force a crossing window no matter what direction I go. So you see this? It's a crossing window no matter what. I've gotten into this habit. When I use the stretch command, I type C and then I go ahead and select, and I don't have to think whether it has to go from right to left or left to right. That's my crossing window. I click on it, I enter, and I don't have to pick on the objects. I know that this has to get shortened by 2 feet. So I click somewhere near the object. I have ortho on, and it needs to come down 2 feet. So I type 2 feet since it's already pointing in the right direction, and enter. And now it's a matter of moving it into place. So I type M, enter, select my objects, enter, and move it from this endpoint. And I'll turn ortho off, and I'll place it right there. I want to make sure that I unlock that wall layer. I can come back over here to my dropdown, and I can unlock it from here. That's one way to do it. And there it is, unlocked. Or I could have used this icon, the unlock, which is the opposite of the lock icon. Either one would be fine. Now what I need to do, and by the way, here's something you should do in the process of constructing your plans, as well as your elevations. Go ahead and turn off layers just to make sure that everything is right. What I mean by that is I'm going to turn off this A plan layer. And yes, it is my current layer. And yes, I do want to turn it off right now just because I'm checking my drawing file. And you want to make sure that all of your openings are cut through. Over here, I don't have that, so I need to fix it. So I need to trim that out. I'll type TR, enter, and just go from one end to the other with a fence, and then enter. So double check the drawing. And now I'll go back and turn on the layer. And now I'm guaranteed that when I print this out and the red line is supposed to print darker, it'll print and stop right here at this point and then continue on the other side. So it's going to look like this window opening. It's a thinner line compared to the wall lines. But before I continue, let me also do this for 1 second. Because right now I've been showing just one single piece of glass, if you will, right? This one line. If you're interested in dividing this further, you can do that. Let's say, for example, that I would like 2 window openings here within this frame. What I would do is I would draw a line from this midpoint up to that midpoint, and then enter. And then I would offset that line. So O, enter, a distance of 1 inch in both directions. So 1, enter, and I'll go from this point over to the right, and then select and over to the left, and then enter. And then I take this line, which I no longer need, and delete it. And now I can just trim that segment out, typing TR, enter, click on it, and then enter. That's doable also. It's up to you, your decision to make, but just make sure that you do have windows in your living dining area, the one in the kitchen. If you'd like to add another one, go right ahead. And then windows, at least one set of windows in your bedrooms. And then think about where the furniture would go and where the location is better for the window, which wall. And also do not forget to finish adding the steps to your decks. I'll show you real quick what are some options to think about. Let's say over here, I would like to come out and then maybe go and step down. And remember, this building is only 18 inches above ground. I have over here 1, 2, 3 lines that represent the risers. And then I have these 2 steps. And then if I start down at ground here, that's at 0. I take the first step, that's plus 6 inches. I take the next step, that's plus 12 inches. And then one more, that puts me at plus 18. I'll come over here and then I'll simply offset the distance, which was 12 inches. But if I don't remember what that distance was, here's what I can do. I can come over here and it's asking me to specify the offset distance. And I can actually give that offset distance by clicking on the screen and basically indicating that I'd like to offset whatever the distance is from this endpoint, and I click on it, over to this endpoint, and I click on that. It has accepted that distance, and now I can come over here and offset. Click on the line, offset it up. So I click, and then offset again. And then enter. So this gives me 1, 2, 3 lines that represent the 3 risers and the 2 steps going down. And it's my choice if I would like to have the steps run the full length of this deck or less. So let's say I want to make it less. And let's say I want that stair to be at least or no more than 3 feet. So what I'll do is I will offset. So I type O, enter. Offset distance is going to be 3 feet. So I type 3 feet and enter. And then I select this line and I offset it in that direction. Now, because I had made changes to my layer settings here in the offset command, it's placing it on the proper layer. So that's good. So I'll go ahead and click. But if I had not made that change, that's okay. I would just match properties or move it to the right layer. Now I'm simply going to enter. And then the next thing I will do is type TR, enter, and I'll simply trim away line segments that I don't need. If you believe that works for you, you take a look at it, you like it, great. If you want, you can make it wider. Maybe you want to make it half the width of that deck. So here's where I would use my stretch command. So I would type S, enter. C, enter. This will give me a crossing poly no matter what direction I go. Sorry, an implied crossing window is what I meant, not a crossing poly. And then I'll take it from this endpoint and let it come over to that midpoint. And now over here on the stairs, I think I want to do something that is somewhat symmetrical to the entry stairs. I want to have a set of stairs and I want them to be as wide as the ones that are here. What I'll do is I will type MI, enter, and I'll take the 2 lines and this one and enter. And I'll take it from the midpoint here of that wall and take it over and then click. And then no to erasing the source objects. And then I will trim. So I type TR, enter, and I simply need to trim that segment and enter. I'm interested to see what this would look like. I have the opportunity to test it out. If I like it, I keep it. If I don't like it, I change it. But it's just something that came to mind right now. So now that I've made the changes here to the plan, I like to close it out, and I know that I will save changes, but for some reason, I've just gotten into this habit of using the Control S keyboard shortcut. That gives me the quick save, and then I close out of it. And now I come back to my elevations and sections. It lets me know that the Xref was modified. I will reload it, but I don't need to compare the changes. I know what the changes are. So look closely at the Xref. I'll click reload. And there are the changes, which is great because now I can continue to draw. Since the last time I drew this, I made changes to the steps. Whatever steps I had placed on the front elevation now need to go on my other elevation, and then I need to switch that around. I'll take care of this in bits and pieces here. Last, we talked about the section. I'm going to use the section here as a bit of a guide. If I do a DI enter, I can check the distance of the ceiling, and that's 8 feet. And then I left about a foot for the structure. And it doesn't matter if you don't understand the structure completely. It's okay. Just go with these round numbers and you'll be all right. I'd like the ceiling to be at 8 feet, and then I'll give myself a foot. And then if I wanted to, I can go with a flat roof, or I can go with a hip roof or gable or shed. I'll decide what to do in just a moment. I'd like to begin, first of all, by correcting my elevations. In looking at my front elevation here, I'll start with the stairs. I basically just need to modify what I've drawn. And the reality is that I have it drawn over here. I think what I'm going to do is copy this information. So I'm going to type CO, and remember it's CO or CP, enter, and I'll take the lines here, enter, and I'll simply pick them and bring them over to the side right here. I just want to have them nearby, and then I'll tap the escape key. And then the next thing I'll do is mirror that. I'll zoom in a little closer. I'll type MI, enter, select my lines, enter, and basically mirror them like this. And yes, in this case, I do want to erase the source objects. And now that line is letting me know that that's where the steps should begin. I don't need these 2 lines anymore. So I'm going to select them and then tap the delete key. And now I'll go ahead and type M, enter. I'll take the lines here, enter, move them from this endpoint and have them go to that endpoint. And now I probably don't need that guideline anymore. I'm actually just going to move it up a little bit because I might need it later. And then I also want to see how my steps are working out. And I'll just take my grips and I'll bring this one back. Okay, so that's fine. And the reality is that I do need that line there because that is the edge of my wall. I should bring it back. And if I'm going to do that, I'll just go ahead and grip it, bring it down, and place it right there. And if I look closely, I actually have that line, the short one, and this long line, and they are coplanar. I don't need overlapping lines. So I'm simply going to window that one and delete it. So that takes care of the steps there. Now it's a matter of addressing the steps on the front elevation, or rather, sorry, wrong direction. Here we go, on the front elevation. So the reality is this. It's just a matter of drawing a line. So I'll type L, enter, from this point straight down. And it looks like it's already going to coincide with the line that's there. So I probably don't need this line. I'll just tap the escape key and I'll remind myself that this is where the steps end. I'm going to trim and extend all at the same time here. So I'm going to type EX for extend, enter. And I'd like to extend this line down. And then I'd like to extend this one over. And I'd like to extend that one and one more time. And now I'd like to trim the lines that are no longer needed. And all I have to do is Shift Select to trim. When I'm in the extend command, it's Shift Select to trim. When I'm in the trim command, then it's Shift Select to extend. Just keep an eye on the command line and it'll help you out. So now I hold down the Shift key. I click on that segment, click on this segment, and it's interesting that I can actually still hold down the Shift key and trim that, even though I should be erasing it, but it works with trim. So I enter, and then I take these two lines, I simply window them and delete. And that is what the steps should look like. Now, my building is 18 inches above ground. I'll go back now, repeat the extend command, and just extend this line over like that and enter. Now it's a matter of putting in my windows and projecting that information over. Let me start here since I already had a couple of lines there. But as I continue, I know that my roof, the bottom of my roof probably is going to be at this level. So I'd like this window to be full height, all the way from ground up to my ceiling. And I know that my ceiling ends at 8 feet. All I really have to do is just keep it at 8 feet, and that should take care of it. And then I can see about the roof. I'll go ahead and type O, enter. Distance is 8 feet, enter. And I take this line and I offset it up right there and then enter. And then from here, I'm simply going to use the fillet command. So I type F, enter. My radius is 0. I'm looking at that in my command line. So now I'll type M for multiple and enter because I want to fillet this corner and this one, and then enter. Now it's not on the proper layer. So let me go ahead and type MA, enter, match the properties. This is my source and this is my destination, and then enter. That would be the window, full height, and that's just the opening. And now I need to offset in 2 inches for my frame. And then when I go to do that, given what I know about the offset command and given what I know about my layers, this is currently on my medium layer. I want to switch over to light because I want the opening to pop out, but the frame of the window, I want that to just sit in there and not be as heavy and not print as heavy. I will now offset 2 inches. So I'll type O, enter, and I'm looking at my options at the command line. I'm going to type L for layer and enter, and it is still set to current. So I'll keep that, just click on it. And then the distance is going to be 2 inches. So I type 2 and then enter, and I'll go ahead and offset. And I'm offsetting to the inside of the frame, or rather of the opening, and then enter. And now I'd like to fix this. I'm going to use my fillet command, and let's see if I right click, recent input, is fillet there? Yes, it is. So I grab that, and then my radius is still 0. And then I'll go and type M for multiple and enter, and I'll fillet these. And then I'm actually going to type C for crossing. There we go. I don't know if it'll work down here, but I'll give it a shot. If I type C, enter. Yeah, see, it went in the other direction. And that's because that line is pretty long. So let me go ahead while I'm in the middle of this command. I'll type U and enter. That will undo that last fillet. So now I'll just manually select the 2 lines, and then I'll come over here and do the same thing and then enter. But I'm not done because I decided to make that 2 panes. I'm simply going to draw a line. So I'll type L, enter, from here straight down. And I'll just keep it at about this distance, enter. And then I'll offset that 2 inches. And then I'm going to move. So I'll type M, enter, these two lines. And I'll move them from this endpoint and I'll take them straight down. And I want them to line up. So I'm going to use Shift right click to force perpendicular. I don't have it as a running object snap. This is me overriding my running object snaps. So I'll go to perpendicular, click right there. And then type EX, enter, and extend these two lines down. I'm in the extend command, but I now would like to trim. Shift select to trim according to the command line. So I hold down the shift key and then I click here and there. And now I go ahead and enter to terminate the command. That's the quickest and easiest way you can do it. You could do some further embellishing. It's not necessary. I'm just trying to show you how this can be done. I've seen it before where, see, I'll type J for join, and I'll bring these back together like this. And I'll do the same thing down here. I've seen it where it's been done like this as well. And there's no right or wrong. This represents a window, and that's all that matters. And then to really have it represent a window or have it look like glass, I'll do the following. I need one more layer here. This one is light, and then I have my guides, which by the way are currently turned off. But I might want a lighter layer. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll go into my layer properties, and then I'll click new layer, and I'll refer to this one as 04 lighter. And then I'll change that color. I'm looking at the other layers, that furniture layer, it comes in relatively light, and that's blue. I'm going to make this one blue. And then click OK. And then I'll make that my current layer. And I'm going to come in here. And when we represent glass in architectural drawings, we basically draw either 2 or 3 lines at an angle. I'm going to come over here, and using polar tracking, I'll try 30 degrees. Let's see if that's going to work for me. And I'll go ahead and draw a line from this point at an angle. Let me turn polar tracking on. And that would be a 30-degree angle right there. And maybe that's not enough. So I'll switch it over and I'll go to 45 degrees. Maybe that's better. So I'll just draw a line like this, enter. And then I'll draw another line. Or actually, no, I'm going to copy that one. So I'm going to type in CO, enter, take that line, enter. And I'm just going to move out here. Click right there, turn my polar tracking off. I'd like to make a copy here and another copy right there. There's no exact science here to it. And then I'm going to pan over this way. You know what? Let me just tap the escape key. And I'd like to take the 3 lines here and actually copy them over to the other glass opening. I'm going to type CO, enter, use an implied cross window to pick all 3, enter. And this time I'm going to turn off my object snap because I don't want it to snap. So I'll pick it from here. And I'll basically just place it there and then tap the escape key. Zoom it out. That represents glass. It's one way of doing it. And then while I'm on the subject of how we represent things, I need this to also represent a door opening. And I think I'm going to apply the same concept where the opening is going to be heavier and then the frame is going to be lighter. So I'm going to type MA to match properties, enter. I'll select this as my source. And then the 3 lines here are my destination objects, and then enter. And then for doors, in elevation, we draw 2 lines. And let me show you. I'm looking at my door. I'm going to draw 2 lines, and the 2 lines end up meeting at the pivot point. So this is the pivot point. It happens to be right here on the right-hand side. And I've done that on purpose. And I'm thinking maybe it could flip in the other direction, but for now, I'll leave it alone. Here's what I need to do on my elevations. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to draw a line. So I'll type L, enter. And I draw a line from this endpoint, and I'm just now realizing my O snaps are off. So I will turn them back on. And I'll take it from the endpoint over to the midpoint, and then here, and then enter. I refer to this as my pivot point, also the hinge point. So it's indicating in the elevation that this is the side of the door where the hinge is located. And then where the other 2 points happen to be, that's the point that opens. But then I need to do one more thing, and I need to make this a dashed line or a hidden line. I'm going to look at my properties, and I'm going to see if I have a hidden or dashed line loaded, which I do not. So I'm going to click on Other. Notice how it shows that X plan drawing that's being referenced here does have hidden assigned to it, but that's irrelevant. I actually need to load it here into this drawing. So I'm going to click on Load. I'll look for Hidden and then click OK. And now click OK. And I'll select both of the lines and change it so that the line type is hidden. And then go over to my properties and change the scale. And I'll start with 12 and enter. That looks okay. I may change it later. Tap the escape key. It reads okay. Perhaps when I print out a PDF, I might need better spacing, but for now, that's good enough. So in my case, there really isn't too much else to show. There's the deck. I need to finish that off. And I guess I could draw a line. And let's see. I'd like to place it on the correct layer. So I'm going to click on this icon in the layer panel where it says Make Current. I click on Make Current. I'd like this to be my current layer. There it is. And then I'll draw a line. So L, enter. And it looks like this point is already in line. And just to make sure, I'll click on that endpoint, start coming up. And yes, it is in alignment. So now I'll just come straight down here. I'll use my object tracking and track this midpoint, bring it over. And right there where it's meant to align, it should, and it doesn't. So I better turn ortho on. And there we go. I click on it and enter. Time for me to put a roof on my building. I have an 8-foot ceiling, and then I have my structure. I'm referencing my section here. I'll go ahead and offset this line up 8 feet. But I don't need to do that because this line is already at that location. So I'm just going to take that and extend it out. No exact length right now. I just want to take this line and carry it across. This represents the bottom of my roof. And then I'll offset that line 12 inches. Let's say I wanted to put in a flat roof. How much of an overhang do I want? That's a decision I have to make. You can make the overhang anywhere from 6 inches to 3 feet, 4 feet. It all has to do with design. So in my case, I will arbitrarily set it to 2 feet. I'm going to type O, enter. I'm going to type in 2 feet, enter. And I'll take this line, offset it that way, enter. Oh, I should have done the other side too. Okay, here I go. I'll right click, repeat offset. 2 feet is correct. I enter, take this line over that way and enter. Now I'm going to fillet the lines. F, enter. It's going to be M for multiple. So I type M, enter. And then I just go around, finishing the overhang, and then enter. The lines that are here, they actually can get trimmed now that I have a roof in place. So I'm going to type TR, enter, and I'll take it from this point. I'll just click in that empty space all the way across like this and click, and then enter. And then I'll come over here, use an implied crossing window, select the objects, and delete. That's what my house would look like if it had a flat roof. And maybe I want to extend that roof so it covers my deck. And maybe I put a post out here to carry the weight of that roof. And those are things that you think about when you're designing. But our goal here is to construct this and just focus on how it gets drawn. Let's say that instead of a flat roof, I wanted to put a hip roof. And a hip roof, it actually has the slope on all four sides. So whatever slope I see in this elevation, I'm also going to see the same one on the other side. In architecture, when we draw the roofs and we do slopes, the slopes are always based on a rise versus a run. If I go across 12 inches, I could come up 3 inches, and that's going to give me the slope that I would want. Obviously, if I go over 12 inches and come up 12 inches, that's a 45-degree slope. And that might be a little too much. I like to keep my roof shallow, so I'll go with a 12 run and a 3-inch rise. So that's a 312 slope. Let me show you how I'm going to put that in. Coming in over here, I'll just draw something up on top to get that angle. So I'm going to type L, enter. I'm going to click right here, and then I'm going to take that over 12 inches. So I type 12, enter. And then I take this up the height, which is 3, enter. So that's a 12 to 3 slope. And then I draw the line here to end it, and then enter to terminate that command. 12-inch run, 3-inch rise. That's the slope angle. If you'd like to change the slope, you can easily just grip this line, take it up, and let's say 1 inch. So now it's going to be a 412 slope, and I take this angled line and I connect it. So maybe that's better. You pick whatever you'd like. But now that I have the angle, I can delete these 2 lines right here, and then I can take this line and move it. So M, enter, select the line, enter, from this endpoint over to that endpoint. And then, because it's not long enough, and I really don't know how far it needs to go, I can go ahead and just select it and pick it right here at this point, and then right click it and scale it. And let that scale up. You see this? You see how it's scaling? All the way up like that. I don't know where it stops yet, but I know that I have the right angle. And the only way I'll know where it stops is if I come to my front elevation, and where the 2 peaks meet, then I'll know that. So let me do that real quick here, because I already have some information figured out. So watch this. I'm going to come over here and type CO, enter, implied crossing window like this, enter. And I'll pick this base point and take it over. And yes, that's a long line. It's okay. Over here, and then shift right click and go perpendicular right there. And then tap the escape key. And now all I have to do is mirror this. But I also have to get that 2-foot distance over here. But I'm thinking ahead, and watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to type MI, enter. And I'd like to mirror this line and this one, and then enter. My mirror point goes between the width of my building. So shift right click, and I'm going to select midpoint between 2 points. My first point is here. My second point is there. That's the width of my building. And now I simply click, erase the source, no. And that gives me the height of my roof. And now it's just a matter of trimming or using the fillet command. So if I type F, enter, my radius is at 0. I can fillet the 2 lines here. I can then come over here. That line's a little bit longer. I can fillet or trim, but I'll use trim. So TR, enter, like that, and enter. That gives me the height of my roof. And now that I have that height, I can draw a line from this point over, and I'll just take it all the way across and then enter. And then I can fillet this. So I type F, enter. I have that side, and now I need to figure out the opposite side. So I'll mirror again. MI, enter. This line, enter. The midpoint of this line will do just fine. So I'll click there, and then I'll click up here, but I'm going to make sure I don't touch any of my object snaps, any endpoints or midpoints. I just want to be clear, open area right there. So I'll click no to erase the source objects, and then fillet. So that's my roof. I did start drawing lines here, and this one represents heavy, right? Because this is really in front. And this information here is also in front. The roof, you could almost say, is also in front. I might change that and see what it looks like. So I'm going to type MA to match properties, enter. I'd like to take this as my source, and I'm simply going to use an implied crossing window like that, like that. The roof is in front as well. And we'll see how that prints out. And of course, I can do the same thing with the roof over here. What I'd like to do next is start to give this a really nice feel for an elevation. So I'd like to bring in my Entourage. So I'm going to open my Entourage drawing right now because I don't remember if I made blocks out of everything. Going to find my Entourage drawing, and there it is. I click open. Let me zoom out. These are the trees, and it looks like I did make a block out of the trees in plan view in this case, but I did not make a block out of them in elevation. Let me do that right now. And I'll simply type B, enter. I'm going to look at the names that I have in here. I'll call this one Tree 01 Elevation. I do want to pick that insertion base point, and I'd like for it to be this point here. And then I will select my objects. I'm going to window all of the objects right here. Enter. Yes, I'd like to convert them to a block. And then I'll click OK. So that is my tree in elevation. I'll go back to my drawing. And I could open up my library of blocks, and I could drop it in. Since I already have it as a block, I'll simply go back. I'm going to click on it. And then I'm going to use the clipboard here. Home tab, clipboard panel. Over here, I'd like to make a copy. So I click on copy clip. Now I come over here to my other drawing, back to my clipboard, and I'm going to click on paste. You see how it says paste and then paste as block? Because it's already a block, I don't need to do that. I'm simply just going to paste it in here. So I click on paste, and don't worry about where it's selecting it from. In fact, I'm just going to bring it over here and click it. And then when I hover over it, it is a block. But what I'm going to do is put this on a different layer, and I'll call that my lighter layer. And now I'll just take it from that insertion point, turn off ortho, and bring it over to my elevation. And I'm going to place it somewhere here, and I want to make sure that it doesn't snap to that midpoint, but I do want it on the line. So I'm going to use my shift right click and select nearest and place it right there. And then I may want to add another tree. So I'll make a copy of this one. And I'll take it from that endpoint over. I'll also shift right click and go to nearest and place it right here. Tap the escape key. And I'll take this one and just go over to the properties and scale it up a little bit. Let's say from a scale of 1 to perhaps 1.2, and then enter. And that scales it uniformly. Tap the escape key and we're good. And now as I begin to do that, I'm noticing that it's interfering with my drawing over here, the other elevation. Now's a good time to go ahead and type M, enter, and just window all of this. And then enter, and just move it over and turn ortho on, just to give yourself some room. And then this is my ground line over here. I also have a ground line there, but I want the ground line to be really, really heavy here. I'm actually going to change that and place that on my heavy layer like that. And instead of it extending that far, I'm just going to bring it back, put it right here. And I'm going to draw another line, let it line up with that one, take it over, enter. And this one, I'm going to bring it in about that much. And then I'll make sure that it goes on to that heavy layer, because your ground, you always want it to be heavy. Also, I'm not concerned, by the way, with this external reference because it is not going to show up in my final drawing. In fact, if I don't want to see my external reference, I can come over here to my external references window and I'll look at the plan and I can right click that and simply unload it for now. And when I unload it, basically takes it out of my file, takes that image out. And that way I can take a look at my elevations and see how they're turning out. And then I can go back to my external references, give that a right click and reload it. And I bring it right back. And then eventually I can actually just type M, enter, and take this elevation, click on it, and then just move it up, straight up. And then that really moves it out of the way. So there's a lot of different ways to handle this. This elevation will end up going onto a presentation border. I'll address that when the time is right. The next thing I'd like to do here is drop in a person. When I made the entourage here, it was simply trees. And we didn't get into making people, but here's where I'd like to do that. And I'll show you how I've drawn this in the past. But to do that, I want to go over to a site here and show you what they talk about in terms of the proportions of a human figure. And basically, you're taking the human figure and dividing it into 7 equal parts. The head obviously is the size of one of the circles. And then you can see the second circle where things seem to start to line up there, right down the middle, the third. You could do this if you wanted to, draw those 7 circles and then follow the guide. But I'm going to do it a little different here. Minimize that, go back to my drawing here, and I'll make that lighter layer my current layer. And then I'm going to come in here and I'd like to put a person standing on the deck. So I'm going to draw a line. I'd like to go to the nearest point. So shift right click, select nearest from here and take that up. Typical height of a person, perhaps 5'6". So I type 5'6" like this and then enter. This gets a little hard to see on this dark background. To make life easier on me right now, I'll just go ahead and take this line and place it on layer 0, and then I'll draw on layer 0, and then I'll move it back onto the layer where I want it. At least this way it stands out. And by the way, I'm showing you how to draw this person because I would like to continue introducing more AutoCAD concepts. The next thing I'd like to do is use those proportions, and I'd like to divide this line equally into 7 parts. I'll come over here to the Home tab, Utilities panel, click on that drop down and look at my point styles first. Point styles. And I'd like to select a point style where I have a crosshair like this, or you can select one where it's more of an X, but this will help me identify those points on screen. It was set to this default value where it's just one simple point and that's hard to see. I'm going to switch it to this point style. And then I'll leave it where it says set size relative to screen, and then I'll click OK. Then the next thing is to divide the line. I type this in, div for divide, enter. Select the object to divide, which is this one. and then enter the number of segments or a block. But in this case, it's simply just the segments. And I'm going to type in 7 and enter. And what I'm going to do is turn off my object snaps. And I'll begin by drawing the head of the person. That's a simple circle. So I'll just type in C, enter. And I'm going to simply approximate this. I'll say the center of the circle is somewhere here. And then I'll just draw it about that size. And I'm just guesstimating here. And now to draw the human figure, I will come over to the Home tab, Draw panel, go to the Draw dropdown. Now I'm going to click on this icon. It's the Spline CV. I'll click on that. And then what I'd like to do is go ahead and draw the outline of the human figure, trying to take these proportions into consideration. I'm simply going to eyeball this. So I'll click here one time to get things started, and I'll turn ortho off, and I'll take this line perhaps out here and then bring this down. And I guess it goes about this far down. Click again, click again. Let's see right there. Bring it up and then take it down all the way down to about right there. And then I believe I'll give it another click here just so I can have some feet. I'll bring it up about this high and then take it right back down. Let's say here, another click right there, and then I'll type C for close. So C, enter. I'll go ahead now and simply erase this line. I'll select it and delete. And I need to get rid of the points here. So I'm going to window them and then tap the delete key. And now I can take my figure. And because I use those control points, I can now take this and start moving them around a little bit more to fix my dimensions of the figure here. And then take this and bring it further up. And then bring this one down a little bit more so it's touching the ground. And I'm not trying to be exact here. As long as it looks like it's touching, maybe it overlaps a little bit, and then tap the escape key. Another way that we have drawn figures as well is to, let's see, I'll make a copy of that head and I'll bring it over here. I'll keep it at the same height for now. Bring it over there, tap my escape key, and then I'll simply draw a line. I'll take it across, take it about the width of what I believe to be a figure like that. I will turn off my ortho. I'll bring it over here, more or less to the center. In fact, I'll try to track that midpoint. Let's see, shift right click. Let's see if this is possible. Midpoint, tracks the midpoint. No, it's going to draw to the midpoint. So let me not do that. I'll tap the escape key and I'll try again. So midpoint is more or less right there. Tapping the escape key a couple times, I'll type L, enter. It's somewhere here. And then I'll take it up to that point, shift right click, and I'll go to the endpoint, escape, and then I'll draw another line. And I'll go from this endpoint here, shift right click to this endpoint. That's another way to draw a figure. This one you could say is a little more rigid. And now maybe I need to bring the width in a little bit, and that's not a problem because I'll just use my grips and I'll simply bring it in. Maybe even bring it at a slant like that. Maybe that helps. I don't know. Take this one also, bring it in like that. And that's another example of a figure. Now I can go ahead and select all of these and place them on my layer that's appropriate. And that's how I would drop in some human figures. And by putting in this entourage, it starts to help with the presentation of the elevation. It helps give it a sense of scale and proportion. And if you really, really wanted to push this presentation a little bit more, I'll go back to my layers and I have a heavy, a medium, a light, a lighter. I can even add one more layer here. And I'm going to make this one my halftone layer. And I'll just type in halftone. I'll use all caps here to match everything else. And then the halftone layer, the color on that should be 8. And then what I could do is I could take the figures here and put them on that layer, halftone. Maybe I want to indicate that this tree is just a little bit closer and then this one is a little further back. So I'll take that one and place it on my halftone layer. And I'll just do a really quick test print just to see what's happening with the colors and the line weights that I have set. So I'll use Control P. I don't care too much for the paper size. I mean, it's not as important right now, but I'll go ahead and just switch it over to an 11 by 17. It's not the one that I plan on using, but I'm just picking that one for now. I'll go with my general documentation here. I would like to plot the window, and I simply want to see what this would look like. My plot style table, I'll use my monochrome, and I'll just simply click no for this. Instead of fit to scale, I can check this and I can see if a 1/4 inch fits on my sheet. Looks like it might fit, but maybe I'll bring that down, or let's give that a try. I'll center it and then I'll give that a preview. And if I were to print it at a 1/4 inch, you can start to see what's happening here. And if I look at my windows, there's the opening, nice and bold. My frame is on the inside, lighter lines. My lines that represent the glass, even lighter. That's great. I look at the figures over here and the trees, and they're light enough just to give me a good sense of scale and proportion. And then I can go ahead and close out. And I can already tell that's probably going to have to be at a smaller scale. So maybe 1/8 inch will do it. And then if I click preview on that, that's what I'll get. Now that the scale's gotten smaller, I might have to make some adjustments to my line weights. So I can close this out. And maybe I have a monochrome that is set to a 1/4 inch scale. I have a monochrome that changes the pen weights to a smaller scale. And that's something that I'll look into when it comes time to put the presentation drawings together. This is just giving me an idea, right? I'm just kind of testing the waters out a little bit. I don't want to save any of this. I just wanted to make sure that everything was applied and everything was coming in just right. So I'll go ahead and just cancel out of it. I'll do that every so often just to see at what scale it's going to fit on 11 by 17. I think of the border that I'm going to use, and I'm just preparing for that. The other thing I can do here is I noticed that when I went to print my elevation, there really isn't much information on this wall. I could make it appear as if it's siding or even brick, and I can hatch that in. And I know that I can use this halftone layer, and I can go ahead and type H and enter for hatch. Right now it's hatching as a solid, but I can go in here into my pattern and click on the down arrow, and I can look for brick and just hover over here, and I'll give it a click. Well, actually, before I give it a click, I want to change the scale of that. So instead of 1 inch, what if I try 8 inch like this? Well, it's not going to take it. So let me go ahead and just click on it for a moment. And it's going to take a second here because that's pretty intense. All right, now I'll go ahead and see if I can change the properties on that. Perhaps increase that to 4. And that starts to look better. Maybe I increase that to 8 or 12. Maybe I have to go even more than that, like say 24. And you see how it starts to change. Check and see what's going to work best for you. That could work out. So I'll simply just go ahead and close my hatch creation. You can do that. I can take that pattern also. And if I don't have a brick building, I can go ahead and change this, and I'll simply change it to user defined right here. And the spacing I would like to have, if I was using siding, anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 inches would do. So I can type in 4 inches. And then I get the lines in there, and I can go ahead and close this. And that helps to give my elevation a little bit of material, and it doesn't look so empty. Go ahead and just add something that's going to help build on the character of the building. And notice how slowly I've been adding parts and pieces to it and starting to develop into a nice elevation.